but we're going to make polluters pay and put money in your pockets.
There is an imperative to put a price on pollution, and if there are costs associated with for average families, we will more than compensate those families for those costs.
Well, how are they going to do that? They talk about this rebate as if you're going to get the money back, and then you're going to get a premium, so you're going to get even more money back. How do they calculate that, though? That was a part that was lost from the conversation.
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing ground.
Thank you for joining us. You are listening to A Radio, and this is the Morning Moment. We're on weekdays, 11:45 Eastern. Follow us on Spreaker.com and click on the like button. So I wanted to do this piece. It's got a really weird title, and it's from a very left-wing newspaper. You have to understand that The Guardian, which is what this is from, is very left-leaning. They think Jeremy Corbyn is right-wing. The title of this piece is "Want to Fight Climate Change?" Answer: have fewer children. Now, I've been saying to you for some time that this is the real agenda of the UN situation, Agenda 2030, climate change. This is what it's really about, because a carbon tax, which is short for carbon dioxide, is a tax on human beings. You have to understand that, because the biggest producer of carbon dioxide isn't cars, isn't generating of food or anything else you can think of. It's human beings. But you have to ask yourself this. Well, I do anyway. Certainly in Canada, when they're bringing in 1 million more people every year into Canada, which is going to double the population in less than 30 years, why would they do that if they want to reduce Canada's carbon footprint? Doesn't make sense, does it? It's not logical. It defies the laws of physics, their own science, if you like. They want to increase Canada's population, but how can I put this politely? With the right people. Right being in quotes and in lowercase. Here's that piece. The links will be on my site, and my main comment will be right at the end. Want to fight climate change? Have fewer children. The next best actions are selling your car, avoiding flights, and going vegetarian, according to a study into true impacts of different green lifestyle choices. This is from Damien Carrington, Environment Editor at The Guardian. The question is, can you bring yourself to have fewer of these? And there's a picture of babies. And then it goes on to say, the greatest impact individuals can have in fighting climate change is to have one fewer child, according to the new study that identifies the most effective ways people can cut their carbon emissions. There it is in black and white, ladies and gentlemen. The next best actions are selling your car, avoiding long flights, and eating a vegetarian diet. These reduce emissions many times more than common green activities, such as recycling, using lower energy light bulbs, or drying your washing on a line. However, the high impact actions are rarely mentioned in government advice and school textbooks, researchers found. Carbon emissions must fall to 2 tons, that's metric tons I think, of CO2 per person by 2050 to avoid a severe global warming. I have to comment there. So we've now got a new target now. It was 2030, now it's 2050. But in the US and Australia, emissions are currently 16 tonnes per person, and in the UK, 7 tonnes. That's obviously a really big change, And we wanted to show that individuals have an opportunity to be part of that, said Kimberly Nicholas of Lund University in Sweden and one of the research team. The new study, published in the Environmental Research Letters, sets out the impact of different actions on a comparable basis. By far the biggest ultimate impact is having one fewer child, which researchers calculated equated to a reduction of 58 tons of CO2 for a year of each parent's life. The figure was calculating by totting up the emissions of children and all their descendants, and then dividing this total by the parent's lifespan. Each parent was ascribed 50% of the child's emissions, 25% of the grandchildren's emissions, and so on. Having one fewer child will save 58.6 tons of CO2 equivalent per year. And then it breaks it down of that 58.6. Live car free, 2.4 tons. Avoid round-trip transatlantic flights, no comment, 1.6 tons. Hang dry clothes, 0.21. Buy green energy, 1.47. Switch to an electric car, 1.15. Upgrade your light bulbs, 0.1. Recycle, 0.21. Replace typical car with hybrid car, 0.52. Eat plant-based diet, 0.82. Wash clothes in cold water, 0.25. The graphic shows how much CO2 can be saved through a range of different actions. Quote, "We recognise these deeply personal choices, but we can't ignore the climate effect our lifestyle actually has," unquote. Said Nicholas, quote, "It's our job as scientists to honestly report the data, like a doctor who sees the patient is in poor health and might not like the message, quote, 'smoking is bad for you,' unquote. We are forced to confront the fact that the current emission levels are really bad for the planet and human society," unquote. Quote, "In life, there are many values in which people make decisions and carbon is only one of them," unquote. She added, 1. I don't have children, but it's a choice I am considering and I am discussing with my fiancé, because we care so much about climate change that will certainly be one factor we consider in the decision, but it won't be the only one," unquote. Overpopulation has been a controversial factor in a climate change debate, with some pointing out that an American is responsible for 40 times the emissions produced by a Bangladeshi, and that overconsumption is the crucial issue. I'm going to read that piece again for my American friends, not to make a nasty comment, but to compare who they're comparing America with. America is responsible for 40 times the emissions produced by a Bangladeshi, and the overconsumption is the crucial issue. I have to make a comment there. Bangladesh, if anybody knows about Bangladesh, is basically one big floodplain. Bangladesh, or Bangladeshis, or whatever you want to call them, which were Indians, or Pakistanis, depending on your point of view, breed like rabbits. They breed non-stop. Every year there are floods there. Every year there are millions of people, not millions, but thousands of people killed through floods. It's a natural occurrence. To compare the United States with Bangladesh is asinine. Plain and simple. That's all I'm going to say right now. So I'm going back to the piece. The new research comes a day after researchers blamed overpopulation and overconsumption on the, quote, biological annihilation, unquote, of wildlife, which has started a mass extinction of species on the planet. Oh boy. Nicholas said that many of the choices had positive effects as well, such as a healthier diet, as meat consumption in developed countries is about 5 times higher than the recommended by health authorities. Cleaner transport also cuts air pollution, and walking and cycling can reduce obesity. Quote, "It's not a sacrifice message," she said. "It's trying to find ways to live a good life in a way that leaves a good atmosphere for the planet. I found it really positive to make many of these changes." The researchers analysed dozens of sources from Europe, North America, Japan to calculate the carbon savings individuals in richer nations can make. They found getting rid of a car saved 2.4 tonnes a year, tonnes, a return transatlantic flight saved 1.6 tonnes, and becoming vegetarian saved 0.8 tonnes. These actions saved the same carbon whichever country an individual lived in, but others varied. The savings from switching to an electric car depended on how green electricity generation is, meaning big savings can be made in Australia, but the savings in Belgium are 6 times lower. Switching your home energy supplier to a green energy company also varied depending on whether the green energy displaces fossil fuel energy or not. Nicholas said the low impact actions such as recycling were still worth doing. All of those good things to do, but they are more of a beginning than an end. They are certainly not sufficient to tackle the scale of climate change that we face. The researchers found that government advice in the US, Canada, EU and Australia rarely mentioned high-impact actions, with only the EU citing eating less meat, and in Australia citing living without a car. None mentioned having one fewer child. In an analysis of school textbooks in Canada, only 4% of the recommendations were high impact. Chris Goodall, an author on low-carbon living and energy, said, quote, "The paper usefully reminds us what matters in the fight against global warming, but in some ways it will just reinforce the suspicion of the political right that the threat of climate change is simply a cover for reducing people's freedom to live as they want." Bingo! No more comment, I will continue. Quote, "Population reduction would probably reduce carbon emissions, but we have many other tools for getting global warming under control," he said, unquote. Quote, "Perhaps, more importantly, cutting the number of people on the planet will take hundreds of years. Emission reduction needs to start now." And this is the end of the piece, and this is a comment made by The Guardian themselves. They've got a little subheading, "As the crisis escalates." That's the subheading. That's the impartial newspaper I'm going to read now. "In our natural world, we refuse to turn away from the climate catastrophe and species extinction. For The Guardian, reporting on environment is a priority. We give reporting on climate, nature and pollution the prominence it deserves. Stories which go often unreported by others in the media. Hello, at this pivotal time for our species and our planet, we are determined to inform readers about the threats, consequences and solutions based on scientific facts." Really? Okay. Not political prejudice or business interests. And it goes on to say more people are reading their newspaper, etc. So here's my comment. How about telling those comments to China, India, Pakistan, and yes, Bangladesh? Oh, did I mention Africa as a whole? Bet they won't. They're fine. It's us in the West that must cut back. But they never say how much more the countries I mentioned actually pollute. The West, despite their little sarcastic comments and little digs, are constantly improving their methods of reduction on pollution. We don't need any left-wing nutballs like Climate Barbie in Canada to tell us to reduce pollution. Pollution obviously is not a good thing. No one in their right mind wants extra pollution. Yet, certainly in Canada, the left-wing communists, it's never enough, is it? It's never enough. They always need an extra dollar out of you, don't they? The greatest impact individuals can have in fighting climate change is to have one fewer child, according to the new study that identifies the most effective ways people can cut their emissions. As I've said, and they talked about selling your car, avoiding flights, being a vegetarian. These will all reduce things. Yeah, you want to curl up in a ball in the corner of your room? And then they go on to say, population reduction would probably reduce carbon emissions, but we have many other tools for getting global warming under control. And then he says it takes 100 years. Well, I have to set my stall out here. I think all of this is complete and utter bunkum. Bunkum. China is increasing its population exponentially. What are they doing about that? Nothing. Do you think Russia's going to listen to this? Why do we have to bear the brunt of this? But having said that, this is back in 2017 that they were peddling this garbage. Now in 2019, they are artificially inflating the cost of gas for our cars here in Canada, not to mention the cost of food, as I've been saying previously. These left-wing, UN-funded, backdoor, Soros-funded liberals never stop promoting this diatribe. As I've said before, if you have the ear of the mainstream media, backed by the UN and Soros, pump this crap into our schools as though it's gospel, what can you expect? Regurgitated back to you, nothing but more of the same lies. And as time goes by, more and more of these left-wing moles burrow their way into positions of power and influence in our societies at the local, national and international level, to the extent that your view is then painted as the extreme one, not theirs. That's how it works and continues to work, with very little kickback. By the time the majority of Western countries wake up to what's being foisted upon them, I fear it will be too late. Many people, sadly, honestly believe this guff. To me, it's quite frightening how brainwashed people have become. Now in Canada and the US, it's not quite so bad, but in Europe, it's non-stop brainwashing on all forms of media. And if you dare disagree with them, you are the devil personified. And I'm not exaggerating. I have family members who think I've got 3 horns because I don't accept climate change. I don't accept it. And just to wind them up, I urge everybody to go out there today, start their car up, and if you've got a bit of spare cash, make sure you go and buy another V8. Talk to you soon. You can find more at aradio.wordpress.com, where you can find links to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Gab and email. We are also on Spotify. Just go to the podcast section and type Canadian Politics with a twist and you'll find us. We are continuing to reach out to you, so please pass on the links. Please click on the follow button on Spreaker.com. You can listen to all our morning moments at Spreaker.com under A Radio. That's EHRADIO, A Radio. And please click on the like button. And you can now hear a weekend review of our podcasts on WHBJ DB, News Talk Radio. Join us and many others. And you can find all our podcasts and morning moments at aradio.wordpress.com. Click on the Morning Moments tab.